بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد ومن ولا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Hope everyone is doing amazing. Welcome back to our explanation of Al-Waraqat of Imam Al-Juwayni rahimahullah. Take some time to do this. Forgive me, I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right. And I have sort of a system that I'm trying to follow that I was taught that takes us through the Waraqat, but I'm adding things to it, as you can see, that are going to expand our understanding to prepare us for the next text, which is Lub al-Usul of Sheikh Zakaria Al-Ansari. And then moving on to like Miftah al-Wusul of Sheikh al-Tilmisani, and then also Jami' Jawami' of Imam al-Subki. And after that, khalas, you pretty much can begin to really enjoy the studies more and engage great teachers and teachers. You can leave this pond and go to the oceans that are waiting you, alhamdulillah, because this is just like a puddle, actually. We're going to talk now about al-Zahir wal-Mu'awwal, and this is in the context of the clarity of a text, the strength of its clarity. Al-Zahir is something which we say, I heard from Dr. Mahmoud, tabadar ilayhi al-absar, or something like people see, people notice. Wal-Mu'awwal is something that has to be interpreted. We'll talk about it briefly. So I wrote here in my notes, al-Zahiru khilaf al-Batin. So al-Zahir is the opposite of something which is not clear, something which is subtle, something that's hidden. اللفظ الذي يحتمل معنيين وهو راجح في أحدهما من جهة الوضع. When we're talking about the science of Usul al-Fiqh, we're talking about a word that carries a few meanings, and one of them is clearer than the other because of its usage by the Arabs, and so that makes it preferred. It's the rajih. And that's what Imam al-Subki, he mentions here, and he says, ما دل دلالة ظنية وضعا أو عرفا. ما دل دلالة ظنية وضعا أو عرفا. So something which, it's dalla, it's evidencing something. But it's dalla here, we have to say, is not qat'iyya, dalalatan dhanniya. Ma dalla ala shay'in dalalatan dhanniya. Right? So, or ala ma'na dalalatan dhanniya. It's something that directs you to a meaning, but that meaning is not, it's not qat'i, it's not definitive. Right? It's not definitive. It's implicit. So that means there's going to be some leeway amongst the scholars when they're using zahir for evidence. Because it's not absolute. It's not absolute in that sense, because the scholar had to engage it, had to extract it, had to discuss it, had to debate it. So it's not the same as something that came directly, and clearly from the Quran and clearly from the Sunnah of Sayyid al-Akwan sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. فَحُكْمُهُ وُجُوبَ الْعَمَلُ بِهِ. It's an obligation to act on the dawahir when they're done correctly by scholarship, because this was the practice, as we'll talk about in the future, of the Sahaba and the Salaf. رضوان الله عليهم أجمعين. وَدَلَالَتُهُ ظَنِّيَّةٌ عِنْدَ الْجُمْهُورِ. According to the majority of scholars of Usul, its evidence is not definitive, but it's presumptuous, right? It's presumptive, it's assumed, it's something which scholars are developing hypothesis over. So it's not like if you don't act on this scholar's opinion and you act on another scholar's opinion, you're not going to be held accountable, because it's dalalatul dhanniya, which means now there is some leeway in the interpretation. It's rajih, and we're going to this definition I just gave you. ما دل على معنى دلالة ظنية وهو راجح في أحدهما من جهة الوضع أو العرف. What I just talked about, we're going through that explanation detail for detail. So what does he mean when he says in this definition? I believe this is Imam Ibn Hajib, rahimahullah. Al-Rajih means it's preferred. Al-Marjuh is its opposite. Marjuh is something which is not preferred. وَلَا يَجُوزُ الْعَمَلُ بِالْمَرْجُوح. It's not allowed to act on something which is not preferred. It's not allowed to act on the marjuh. ولا يجوز العدول عن مقتضى إلا بتأويل بدليل. And this is very important now. It's not allowed to act against the zahir, what the zahir sort of dictates, unless there is ta'wil with dalil. And this is very important. Sometimes people just say ta'wil. No, you have to say illa bi ta'wil bid dalil. That ta'wil, except with an interpretation that has an evidence. If that happens, then it's allowed to act on the interpretation, and at that moment it becomes mu'awwal. Mu'awwal, as we'll talk about in the future. So alhamdulillah, I just wanted to give you this brief introduction to al-Zahir. Al-Zahir, we're going to talk about mu'awwal next time, is khilaf al-Batin, right? The opposite of something which is hidden. And I believe this is Imam Ibn Hajm says al-lafz, it's a text, الذي يحتمل معنيين, that has two meanings. وهو راجح في أحدهما, and one of the meanings is preferred over the other. من جهة الوضع أو العرف, I added that because of what Imam Subki says, from the perspective of how the word actually was used by the Arabs, the classical Arabs. Up into the 3rd century, the Arabs, who are people of fasaha, can be used as evidence in the Arabic language. Shawahid, that's why al-Mutanabbi, even though he's great, he's not a shahid in the language. أو العرف, how they used it. وقال السبكي رحمه الله في جمع جوامع ما دل على معنى دلالة ظنية وضعا أو عرفا. Very similar to what Imam As-Subki says. فحكمه وجوب العمل به, and its ruling is that someone wujub al-amali bihi, that someone has to act on the dawahir, because actually they're around, and I said this before, people didn't understand what I was saying years ago, so some of the well-meaning and well-intended brothers attacked me. But I heard this from Sheikh Muhammad al-Hassan al-Diddu, that like around 90% of the texts in Quran and Sunnah fall under zahir, not nas, but zahir. فوجوب العمل به أو وجوب العمل به ودلالته ظنية عند الجمهور أي الراجح وعكسه المرجوح ولا يجوز العدول عن مقتدي إلا بتأويل بالدليل. فنكتفي بهذا وبارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.